Imagine this. You open your mail, and there's a bill. But it's for a service you don't have. You can't use, and that, frankly, doesn't even exist on your property. Sounds crazy, right? Well, that's exactly what happened to a group of homeowners, and it kicked off a major showdown with their own association. Okay, let's dive into this wild case. So this whole thing really boils down to one big question that could affect pretty much anyone in an HOA. Can they actually charge you for a service you literally do not use? You'd think the answer is a simple no way, but as we're about to see, sometimes you have to fight for the obvious answer.
All right, so who are the main players in this story? First up, you've got the homeowners. We're talking about regular folks in the Tonto Forest Estates. And some of them, like a guy named John Cron, just owned empty, undeveloped lots. On the other side, you've got the Homeowners Association, the HOA that runs the whole community. And the person tasked with sorting all this out? An administrative law judge.
Now, here is the absolute core of the problem. The HOA was sending every single lot owner a bill for septic system maintenance. On the surface, that sounds fair enough, right? Community service, everyone chips in. Except there was one massive detail. The homeowners with the empty lots, they didn't have houses, which means, of course, they had no septic systems. They were being charged for the upkeep of something that just wasn't there.
So to figure out who was right and who was wrong, everybody had to go to the one document that matters more than any other, the official community rulebook. And that rulebook has a fancy name, the CC&Rs, that stands for Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. The easiest way to think about it is like the Constitution for the neighborhood. It's a legally binding contract that lays out every single rule, and everyone, from the newest homeowner to the HOA board itself, has to follow it. No exceptions. And buried inside that rulebook, the homeowners found their smoking gun. It was a single sentence in section 4.32. It says, and this is the really crucial part, that the HOA takes over maintenance after the septic system is installed. The homeowner's entire case, their whole argument, was built on those two simple words, after installation. So with that specific rule in their back pocket, the stage was set for a real showdown. This wasn't just a simple disagreement over a fee anymore. This was a fight over what the actual law of their community really meant. So you had two totally different ways of looking at this. The homeowner's argument was super straightforward. Hey, the rulebook says the fee applies after a system is installed. We don't have a system, so we don't pay the fee. Simple. The HOA, on the other hand, had a different take. They argued that, you can't just cherry pick one sentence. Their view was that all community costs should be shared equally by everybody to be fair to the whole neighborhood. If we dig into the homeowner's position a little more, they felt the rule was just crystal clear. There was no room for interpretation. It just seemed completely illogical to pay to maintain a phantom septic system. And get this, adding to their frustration, they testified that when they tried to bring this up at HOA board meetings, they were basically told to sit down and be quiet. They weren't even allowed to make their case. With both sides completely dug in and not going anywhere, the case finally went before that administrative law judge. It was time for someone to make a final binding call. And the verdict came in. Bam! The judge sided completely with the homeowners. The HOA was wrong. So why did the homeowners win so decisively? Well, the judge's reasoning boiled down to this really fundamental legal idea. A specific rule almost always beats a general one. So even if other parts of the CC&Rs talked generally about sharing costs, this one very, very specific rule about septic systems in section 4.32 was the one that mattered most. It was the trump card. In law, specifics are everything. The judge laid out the logic so clearly, you could just break it down into 3 simple steps. 1, the rulebook flat out says the fee is tied to installation. 2, let's look at the facts. These lots have no system installed. 3, so the conclusion is just unavoidable. The HOA had absolutely no right to charge that fee. It's a clean, airtight argument. Okay, so you might be thinking, that's a cool story about septic systems, but why does this matter to me? Well, this case actually holds some really critical lessons for millions of us who live under HOA rules. Here's why this decision is so important. First off, this wasn't just a moral victory. The judge ordered the HOA to pay the homeowners back for their $1,000 filing fee. And that's huge. It means their win was real and tangible. Not only were they proven right, but they didn't have to pay out of their own pocket for the cost of fighting for what was fair. So, what are the big lessons we can all take away from this? First, the exact words in your CC&Rs have real, actual power. They aren't just suggestions. Second, always remember that legal principle: specific rules will almost always beat general ones, so go look for those specific clauses. Third, this is fantastic proof that you, as a homeowner, can challenge your HOA and win when the rules are on your side. And finally, it all comes down to the details. In this case, 2 little words made all the difference in the world. And that really just leaves us with one final thought. This entire stressful, expensive dispute was won and lost over 2 simple words: after installation. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it, what tiny, powerful, game-changing details might be hiding in your own community's rulebook.